boy, you really have to wonder what the Indians are thinking with Brantley. Welcome to another waitingfornextyear.com quick hit on Michael Brantley and how the Cleveland Indians picked up his $12 million option, keeping him with the Cleveland Indians for another year. Now, normally a pickup like this for the Indians is a big deal. Spending $12 million for a player doesn't happen very often. And a player like Michael Brantley, who in 2014 had one of the better seasons in recent memory for the Cleveland Indians, a 6 FWAR season where we got to see a little bit of that power, 20 home runs, almost 100 RBI that year. Looking at traditional statistics, he hit 330, did everything you could possibly want for a left fielder. Now, his fielding, of course, has always been suspect. If you talk to the right person who looks at the right statistic at the right time, you'll get somebody who says, yeah, he can be a little bit better than average. The reality of Michael Brantley in the outfield, you just have to watch him along with some other players in the outfield, because Michael Brantley as an outfielder when healthy is a little bit suspect in and of itself. Now you're talking about a player who is closing in on age 31. You're talking about a player who's come off of 2 straight injury-plagued seasons. Of course, hurt the shoulder in 2015, missed the tail end of that season, missed basically all of 2016. And then did play in 90 games in 2017, made the All-Star game, but not only was he a non-factor in the second half of the season, but turned into a pretty big factor in the ALDS as he became sort of an anchor to that team. And when I say an anchor, I'm talking about the albatross-type anchor, not the anchor that carries the team to victory. Of course, with Encarnacion getting injured, Michael Brantley had to step into that DH role because they didn't have anybody else. And, of course, offensively, he was really a black hole in the LDS. Now, it's not easy to talk about Michael Brantley as an albatross. Obviously, Michael Brantley was the saving grace of the CC Sabathia trade way back in 2008. The player to be named later turned into the one legitimate star for the Indians out of that deal. Of course, Matt Laporta was supposed to be that guy, and he's, I don't think, selling insurance in Florida, maybe selling real estate, not really sure. From 2011 to 2015, Michael Brantley not only was the best part of that trade, but the best player, arguably the best player for the Cleveland Indians. Turned into that really outstanding player that really surfaced in 2014 when we got to see the power, 20 home runs, 94 RBI, good enough in left field that you don't whine and complain about it. Now, that's the 2014 Michael Brantley. The 2015 Michael Brantley, also good, wasn't quite up to snuff to the 2014 version, but still fantastic player, 3.6 FWAR that season, and nothing indicating that he would go on the downward spiral that he did. Injuries happen. They do. And sometimes they happen because of your body's makeup. Sometimes they happen because of bad falls. Sometimes they happen for a variety of different reasons. What you want to look out for are players whose bodies start breaking down and you get those chronic injuries, even if they're not related. And I know when you look at Michael Brantley in 2017, you say to yourself, well, it was the shoulder, some back issues, the ankle. They're not related. But I think common knowledge of just watching sports for a long period of time lets you know that there are certain players whose bodies start to break down when they are exerting themselves physically. And we've seen it before in the past. And I'm only going to mention Grady Sizemore briefly because, of course, we saw the Grady Sizemore experiment. The Cleveland Indians took a chance on Grady Sizemore after the 2011 season. They didn't pick up his option. I believe the option was for $9 million. They did re-sign Sizemore to an incentive-laden contract that would have gotten him back up to that $9 million. He, of course, gets injured in preseason, doesn't play a single game for the Indians after that 2011 season, and the Indians end up paying $5 million for a player who never really played another game for them. And again, he was coming off of 2 injury-riddled seasons, and you could argue that those injury-riddled seasons were not related to each other, but his body started breaking down because he played a lot of baseball games. Sound familiar? Now, Grady Sizemore and Michael Brantley are not the same player. They are not. And it's not really fair to compare Michael Brantley to that guy, but you would think that you would learn lessons. And the lesson being, when you take a $12 million flyer. And those people on the internet saying that $12 million isn't a lot of money. The Indians, let's not forget, had a payroll, I believe, in the $130 million range, $130, $140 million. I don't have the numbers in front of me last year. Took on sizable deals. Obviously signed Edwin Encarnacion to the big deal. Lots of arbitration bump ups. And let's not forget that the Indians' payroll isn't what it used to be. Now, we do have some money coming off the board. Carlos Santana, of course, Brian Shaw, of course, but that being said, we have a lot more money coming on with arbitration bumps and with other just free agent bumps. This payroll should end up somewhere in that vicinity. So by re-signing Michael Brantley, you as an organization have to be sure that he's going to play. He can't be the 90-game albatross. I'm so sick of hearing people say 90 games is fine. That's fine for $12 million. No, it isn't. $12 million is not fine for a 90-game gamble, especially when that 90-game gamble ends up on your playoff roster not being able to play. Obviously, that might not happen. Is it possible that Michael Brantley turns into the player that he was in 2013, 2014, 2015? Sure. Anything is possible. It's possible he comes back completely healthy. But use common sense here. What percentage are we talking about? What's the over-under of Michael Brantley playing 90 games or more? And are you willing to take that gamble? And were other teams willing to take that gamble to sign him to a $12 million deal? Now, supposedly the Indians front office has this magnificent relationship with all of its players. Supposedly Terry Francona has this magnificent relationship with all of its players. So how could that end badly? The Indians have backed Michael Brantley in decisions before. Why do you think the shoulder injury became a bigger issue than it was? I'm pretty sure it was Brantley who decided he didn't want to have surgery. That worked out well. Pushed it back 2 months, ended up not coming back on time, ended up rushing coming back, ended up progressively having injuries throughout the whole 2016 season, ended up only playing, I believe, 11 games that year. So the Indians have backed Michael Brantley over and over again. And from what we hear, Michael Brantley is fantastic in the clubhouse. So why isn't it okay for the team not to pick up that option and to say to Michael Brantley, hey, let's give you a contract that can earn you that $12 million, but you have to earn it. Isn't that what the club option is for? And if we're only putting club options in and they're going to turn into real parts of the deal, then what's the point of putting in a club option? It's to give the team leverage, not the player. Now, I know it sounds like I'm coming off harshly on Michael Brantley, but let's understand a couple of things. In 2011, I did a podcast with Michael Hattery when I was working in a different website. On that podcast, long before people were giving Michael Brantley credit, we discussed Michael Brantley's IQ. We talked about his at-bat IQ, and we're talking about a guy who does more film study than anybody else, probably in the Indians organization. This is a guy who really does his homework. And it paid off in a big way. I think Mike and I were always on the forefront talking about the power surge that we were likely to see because of the IQ. This is a guy who understands pitch counts. This is a guy who understands the type of contact hitting that the Indians have since modeled their team after. It's possible that Brantley was this model. I understand that. Dr. Smooth is a fantastic baseball player. I love him. I want him to do well. I'm not sitting here saying I don't. What I am saying is, as an organization as smart as the Cleveland Indians, with the type of people you have in that front office, and with Terry Francona, who is undoubtedly one of the top 3 or 4 managers in baseball, at least on a performance basis, isn't that something you take into account? Haven't you built up enough clout in the clubhouse that you're allowed to say, hey, Michael, we have some other people we need to sign. Let's do this first. Take a chance on the free agent market. The Indians have Carlos Santana hanging by a wire right now. The Indians have Jay Bruce hanging by a wire by now. And let's not forget, they signed Jay Bruce, traded for Jay Bruce to replace who? Michael Brantley and, of course, Lonnie Chisenhall, who was also hurt. My simple point here is this. If you're going to sign Michael Brantley to this $12 million deal, you better be sure he's going to come back healthy. Because if he doesn't, if you lose Carlos Santana, if you lose Jay Bruce, If you lose Brian Shaw and you can't replace them with suitable replacements, not to mention the fact that Michael Brantley now has to play a position. And we saw what happened when he played left field last year. Didn't look great, made a couple of good plays, ultimately broke down. Do you move him to first base? And what's the assurance that Michael Brantley is a good first baseman? For those of you, by the way, saying anybody can play first base, let's think about that for a second. It took Carlos Santana having to be a focused first baseman, having that to be his primary position, for him to showcase Gold Glove ability, which he did last year. So now you're talking about a 30 home run hitting, potential Gold Glove first baseman in Carlos Santana leaving, and Michael Brantley, who's never played the position, potentially filling in. That sounds like a winning combination, doesn't it? No. So this isn't a knock on Michael Brantley, other than the fact that they are now taking a player beloved by the Cleveland Indians and likely putting him in a position for him to be criticized for A, not being healthy, B, not playing in a position that he's good at, or C, moving to another position that he's not likely to be successful at. And you're talking about a team that supposedly has a window, and we haven't even gotten into the Jason Kipnis conversation, have we? So Michael Brantley has re-upped with the Indians, and it is a big, big gamble. Is it a good gamble? Remains to be seen. We still don't know who the Indians are going to sign. We still don't know if the Indians are going to trade away Jason Kipnis. And when you see a guy like Jordan Bastian making assumptions, that's not the right word. When you see Jordan Bastian tweeting, they're not really sure what they're going to do with Jason Kipnis yet, you start to think, is there a world in which a team that went to the World Series and was one run away from being the World Series champions to 2 years later, potentially losing Jason Kipnis in a trade, potentially losing Carlos Santana to free agency, losing Jay Bruce, who was a main cog in that 22-game win streak, a main cog in getting you to the playoffs this year, and Brian Shaw, who's been, well, he's not a Twitter fan, boy. He's been one of the better relief pitchers in baseball on a team that has rebuilt its bullpen. Now, we don't know who they're going to fill that in with, but think about this. Callaway gone, Beret gone. The options that are out there, are they as good as the ones that we can bring back from our own internal pieces? Don't know. It's early. But Brantley's coming back. Healthy, not healthy. Playing a good position for him, not playing a good position for him. No choice now. Michael Brantley's costing us $12 million. So it remains to be seen. Was it a good pickup? Wasn't it? Leave a comment below. Subscribe to Waiting for Next Year's YouTube channel. Push us up over 150. We're sitting at 147 right now. Welcome back, Dr. Smooth.